Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam, dear devotees. Welcome to Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. Today we are once again very happy to have the association of His Grace Srinidhi Govinda Prabhu, who has kindly agreed to complete the chapter despite his busy schedule. So without further delay, Prabhuji, please start. You are free. You are free to switch off the video in case if you think we're interrupting with the bandwidth.
You need to tell me, Prabhu, because if it is not coming good, because it's coming from mobile Wi-Fi.
It's good for now, okay. So I will let you know.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naranchaiva Narottamam. Devyam Saraswatim Vyasa Tato Jayamudhirayet. Nashtaprayesho Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtati. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Vena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Vena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayham Dadanti Swapadantikam Namavo Vishnupadaya Krishnapashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pucharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, welcome to the Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Wednesday morning. We are discussing chapter 52 of Prabhupada Lilamrta. Just a recap of the last class, Prabhupada actually suggests 11 of his disciples to, give initiation on his behalf in various places, including India. And he also heard that Mayapur was attacked by some Gundas who are Muslims. The devotees were beaten, and Bhavananda Prabhu fired shotguns and he was arrested. That disturbs Prabhupada. And few days later, local Hindus of Mayapur were outraged at what had happened and were mobilizing the mass petitions in support of ISKCON temple. And in the last chapter, Prabhupada also suggested that all grahasthas should live near temple to attend morning programs and associate with the devotees, should not live far from temple. And towards the end of July, Prabhupada's health started to worsen again, and he mentions that the end might come at any moment. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj actually suggested that if Prabhupada could travel to West and be with his disciples, that he would find a new life. But astrologers, some of the astrologers suggested that he should wait for 2 months. Meantime, the governor of Madras actually comes to Vrindavan and meets him, and he also invites him to come to Madras to stay in Raj Bhavan and take the treatment. And his servants began discussing the merits of travel to Madras and other places in the world. And Prabhupada became very ill and no appetite. And he said to all the devotees that please pray like this, my dear Lord Krishna, if you desire, please cure Prabhupada, something like that. And now we are going to start the next last part of chapter 52. Is Srila Prabhupada would sit facing Krishna and Balaram, and the devotees would sit down around him and begin kirtana. As the kirtan began, 2 Gurukul boys would arise and come in front of him, where they would begin dancing with arms raised, their cotton chadaras swinging back and forth. Prabhupada would usually not speak or even smile, but after a few minutes would give his garlands to a devotee who would place them around the necks of the dancers. Soon 2 other young boys would come forward, and the first boys would garland them with garlands they had received from Srila Prabhupada and sit down. For half an hour, the dancing and singing continued. Guests to the temple would gather, many of them offering money at Prabhupada's feet, which rested on the embroidered silk cushion. Srila Prabhupada was gaining resolve to go to West. One of the astrologers had said that by 4th September, after checking with a physician, Srila Prabhupada could undertake a travel, but for health only. I will go there to Pennsylvania, said Prabhupada, and he appeared hopeful. He didn't consider the astrologers absolute guides. He had consulted them more out of curiosity. Astrology was a part of Vedic knowledge, but the modern day practitioners were often dubious. When Abhiram came to Delhi with a report from a new astrologer, Srila Prabhupada heard it while continuing to chant intently and silently on his beads. His main point, Srila Prabhupada, said Abhiram, was that for 6 months there is a trouble, especially in the first week of September and then again on certain dates in October and November. The longevity is 82 years, 5 months and 11 days, which means February 28th, 1978. This is according to birth and stars arrangement. But he made it very clear that due to the hand of Krishna, this could be changed. If you pass through 1978, then he sees 4 or 5 years ahead clear. When the report was finished, Srila Prabhupada was quiet for a few minutes and then said, by calculation, the age is finished. That doesn't matter. Rather, if I am finished now, it will be glorious. Living also will be glorious, said Tamala Krishna. And Prabhupada said, yes, let us see as Krishna desires. Other horoscopes also showed an inauspicious time ahead. Due to the entry of Saturn into the 8th house, Srila Prabhupada took this to indicate that his condition was most critical. In either case, whether according to the stars or according to Krishna, who could change it? Who could change destiny? Everything was in Krishna's hands, but Srila Prabhupada was still inclined to tour the West. If I can work little more, he said, our society will be very strong. I want to see that what I have done is made still stronger. Prabhupada's talk of travel, however, coincided with increasing weakness. He talked less. When Tamala Krishna tried to encourage him to translate, he replied, when I get inspiration, I will take it. I will take it up. Don't try to force me. I am going through a difficult time and am now feeling restless. It is not mechanical. The Jhulana Yatra pilgrims were mostly villagers. Many were from Rajasthan. The men and women wearing brightly colored clothes and women wearing heavy gold and silver bangles and bracelets, which clanked as they walked barefoot on the roads. The numbers of mendicant sadhus also increased, and they became the common sight, with their ash and clay covered bodies marked with brightly colored tilak. The Yamuna had flooded in many places and was too swift for bathing or swimming. Thousands of visitors came to Krishna Balaram Mandir, which was now one of the most popular temples in all of northern India. The evening Aarti at Krishna Balaram Mandir was so crowded that resident devotees couldn't attend, but could only stand in the back of the courtyard at the edge of a packed jostling crowd. Some of the Gurukula boys would greet the guests with Hindi Back to Godhead magazines, each boy selling 200 or 300 magazines a night. Srila Prabhupada was glad to hear this. A few of Prabhupada disciples from West also arrived just to be with him, hoping to render some menial service. When Prabhupada received them in his dark, cool quarters, he was sitting up on his bed. One of the arrivals, Madhudvisha, had left Krishna consciousness for more than a year, but now came before Prabhupada shaven head and wearing Vaishnava tilaka. And Prabhupada says, "Don't leave us." And he was feelingly very saying, you can stay as a grahastha, but don't leave us. To Satswarup Prabhupada, to Sattva-swarup, Prabhupada said, I like your magazine Back to Godhead, especially the article Srila Prabhupada Speaks Out. Then Shrutakirti, who had come from Hawaii, showed Prabhupada some candles they were producing and selling. And Prabhupada laughed. You Westerners, he said, there is no scarcity of money, but now I have taught you how to spend it. For more than half an hour, Prabhupada went on talking pleasingly. Later, Tamala Krishna told the devotees that Prabhupada's outlook seemed to change, depending on the people around him and the news he received. And he told them of Prabhupada's plans to go to the West. That evening, when Srila Prabhupada called for Tamala and the others, the devotees gathered and went up to Srila Prabhupada's balcony. Not knowing what to expect, Srila Prabhupada was lying on his bed. Sit down, he said. I want to simply see you all. It gives me vital force. Mercifully and lovingly, he looked upon his devotees as they sat around him. The air was filled with frank incense, billowing from the pot of coals Upendra had prepared for keeping mosquitoes away. Evening Aarti began in the temple and the sounds of Kirtana arose to the little balcony. One by one, the men present began to massage Prabhupada. Shrutakirti and Satswarup were each massaging a leg, while Tamala Krishna massaged Prabhupada's head. Another devotee fanned. Prabhupada lay back with eyes closed peacefully. You are all Vaishnavas, he said. Be merciful to me. Srila Prabhupada frankly wanted to hear good news. It inspired him to continue. He didn't want to hear other news. His secretary would read him letters in the afternoon, and Prabhupada began allowing the other devotees to be present. Once, when they entered his room, he said, if in the world there is one Vaishnava, he can deliver all the world. And you are that one Vaishnava, Srila Prabhupada, said Satswarup. And Prabhupada said, you become, each of you, why not? Then Guru Kripa Swami says, we can try. Yes, try, said Prabhupada, but follow, do not imitate. Today we have a letter about book distribution, said Tamala Krishna, the monthly report. That is a real good news, said Prabhupada. He listened with full attention as Tamala Krishna read the BBT newsletter. He was pleased and absorbed, sometimes shaking his head and smiling to hear the achievement of his disciples. Then he heard a long letter from Ghansham about his trumpet book distribution in Eastern Europe. When he heard a letter from Tulasi Das, who was developing a Krishna consciousness farm community in South Africa, he commented, this letter makes my chest swell that I have such a disciples performing such an activities. In another letter, a devotee wrote a prayer stating that all his god brothers were praying for Prabhupada. And he hoped that Krishna would respond And surely, said Prabhupada, I am practically living on your prayers. I haven't eaten in the last 6 months. So I must be simply living on your prayers. And hearing in a letter from South America that the devotees were praying for him, he said, I think I will have to stay. Krishna is very kind. He is Bhakta Vatsala. So many devotees are praying. It cannot be frustrated. I think this is why I am feeling inspiration to go out. In this condition, anyone else would prepare for death. But I am going on a tour. I don't think of it as a sentiment. Krishna is actually present as the Krishna consciousness moment. I am not without Vrindavan wherever I go to the temples, to our temples. Panchadravida Swami wrote that he would exchange his youth for Srila Prabhupada's old age. We are the same age, Srila Prabhupada says. The body has nothing to do with Atma. In the Vaikuntha world, we are the same age. New life, new boys, Nava Yavana. The outward dress does not affect me. As a further reply to Panchadravid, Prabhupada dictated, may Krishna give you a long life and preach Krishna consciousness. You are our future hope. For the devotees who had been with Prabhupada in months, it was like old times, sitting with him and hearing him answer letters and give advice for becoming victorious in Krishna consciousness. Hearing him discourse made everything all right. But as they were leaving his room, he said softly, these are my last days. When Tamala Krishna got an especially dynamic report from Hamsadatta Swami in Sri Lanka, he decided to bring it to Srila Prabhupada early in the morning. Prabhupada had just finished his bath and was sitting upstairs on the balcony just before his 9:30 darshan in the temple. He wore Tulsi garland from Krishna Balaram as well as a fresh flower garland. He reclined on the round bolster pillow and listened. Hamsadatta's letter contained news of a debate he was having with a famous atheist in Colombo, a Dr. Kovur. As soon as Tamala Krishna began to read the letter, however, Prabhupada asked to hear Dr. Kovur's response. Tamala Krishna then began reading from the news clipping enclosed in the letter. Das and Swami asked whether scientists can make a chicken to come out of a plastic egg. And Tamala Krishna read, I do not know whether they are aware that scientists have made over 10 elements such as fermium, plutonium, einsteinium, and so on. Prabhupada interrupted. Rascal, you are simply producing empty sound. Where is the chicken, rascal? The chicken, the hen, is better than the scientist. She has produced another egg within a week. You simply say this and that and that and this and that, that's all. What is your value? We don't give you any value. You are less important than the chicken. Tamala Krishna resumed reading again. We have created over 10 elements that even God, then there is a dash there. Again, Prabhupada interrupted. Who cares for your creation? Without your creation, the egg is there. No, he says. Tamala Krishna went back to reading the text. Even God could not create them because he did not know the technology involved in making them. And Prabhupada says, God kicks on your mouth. He doesn't require to take your creation. Without your creation, he can do everything. God kicks on your mouth with shoes. Talk it to you nonsense. Tell him that. And I'm sure Hamsadatta did, said Tamala Krishna. Next, we'll read his reply. Anyway, the scientists go on. Are these two men aware of the success of Sri Lanka scientist Dr. So-and-so? Prabhupada says, who cares of his scientist? The Nobel Prize winner is synthesizing amino acids. Nobel Prize winner scoffed Srila Prabhupada. Another rascal has given him a Nobel Prize. He is a rascal, and another rascal has given a Nobel Prize. Suri Sakshi Matala. In the liquor house, the witness is the drunkard. If there is an incident within a liquor shop and the proprietor of the liquor shop has brought some witnesses, but all of them are drunkards, what is the value of that? As soon as you are a drunkard, immediately you are rejected. Tamala Krishna reads on, and Prabhupada continued to interrupt him at almost every sentence. The devotees had not seen Prabhupada so fiery in weeks. When Tamala Krishna read Hamsadatta's reply, Prabhupada was pleased to see how many of the same points his disciple has made. He is putting very strong arguments, said Prabhupada. This is preaching. Two factors were making Srila Prabhupada indecisive about going west. One was worldly formalities of the passport and the US residency card. And the other was Srila Prabhupada's personal hesitancy based on the reports from the astrologer. His health was, of course, the main factor, but at times he seemed ready to discard everything and order his servants to somehow take him to London. Already he had sent Abhiram to Calcutta to deal with certain complications. His US residency, the green card, had expired, and the consulate of Delhi had insisted that he come for interview. Meanwhile, Prabhupada's passport and a temporary visa were being readied and would take 4 to 5 days. One of the Ayurvedic doctors who sometimes visited told Prabhupada he should wait for a week or so. But Prabhupada found simply working up the will for travel and then not going and then deciding again to go was exhausting. On hearing the latest news that the US consulate insisted on an interview which seemed to be physically impossibility, he couldn't rest. Lying on his bed for hours, he finally called Tamala Krishna and said, I want to go. Can you arrange to carry me? Somehow or the other, take me. Here I don't expect any good. Psychological enthusiasm is there. Don't be afraid. I am not afraid. Either to die in the temple here or there, it is all Vaikuntha. Tamala Krishna asked to first discuss this with few GBC men who were present. But when the devotees came into Prabhupada's room that afternoon, Prabhupada said, no discussions. I have made up my mind. Arrange immediately for going. But again, there were complications. The doctor asked Srila Prabhupada to wait for another week. And Prabhupada also did not want to leave India without his green card for US. He sent Balavanta to Calcutta to try and get the green card. With so many matters unsettled, Prabhupada remained undecided whether to go to England now or wait. I plan to stay in America, Srila Prabhupada said. I will not come back until I complete the Bhagavatam. I want to organize there. The American boys are so nice. If I make everything strong, then the movement will endure. Let's go now. The doctor will say 4 or 5 days for the medicine to act. Then wait a little longer again. This is their method. Finally, a report came from Abhiram in Calcutta that the passport had been secured and the American consulate in Calcutta would help in getting the green card. And Tamala Krishna ran upstairs and told Prabhupada, there is very good news, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was lying in his bed. When he heard the news, he began to slowly clap his hands, saying, give me good news and keep me alive. He began to think ahead to London, the Radha Krishna deities, They are so nice, he said. Radha Landoneshwar. An innocent boy he is. Tamala Krishna reminded Srila Prabhupada how they could obtain those deities. And yes, said Prabhupada, it was unexpected. I was in a hopeless condition, but Krishna said, here I am, take me. Srila Prabhupada thought of a Bhakti Vedanta manner. That lawn before my room is magnificent, he said. I think good time is coming. Madhudvisha has come back and Gaura Sundara has come. Lost child has come. These are good signs. As he spoke on, his voice, which he had sounded at first small and weak, grew in strength. Mistake there may be, he said, referring to the fall of some of his disciples, but it can be rectified. At the time, be very careful not to commit mistakes. Krishna never forgets a person who does little service. And you also never forget, Prabhupada, said Tamala Krishna. How can I forget? You have all helped me to execute the mission of Lord Chaitanya and my Guru Maharaj. I always pray to Krishna to give you strength. I am insignificant. I cannot do anything, but I pray to Krishna to give you strength. Prabhupada recalled how, after installing the deities in Australia, he had thought, these Melechas and Yavanas, what will they do with the deity? Then the next time he went there, he saw that they were worshipping so nicely. Try to do everything nicely, he said, and Krishna will help you. Whatever I have done has been done in this principle. Whatever my Guru Maharaj has taught me, I try to the best of my capacity to carry out. Srila Prabhupada spoke on, carried by the waves of transcendental emotion and carrying his loving disciples with him. When I go to America, he said, especially Los Angeles and New York, I feel at home. At the mention of New York, he began to remember his first days there. I was like a street boy, he said. I was going here and there, sightseeing. I was in New York City, but one morning I saw all the walls were white. How have they become white? Who has whitewashed them? I thought. I went downstairs and there was no much snow. I went with the umbrella and purchased a pack of milk in the snow. At that time, I was living in a dungeon. It was always dark, but I didn't care. Whatever difficulty, I didn't care. I only wanted to preach. Sometimes people would touch me like men on the Bowery, but no one was inimical. Everyone was very friendly, even the bums. When I went to enter my New York building, the bums would get up from where they were lying down and let me pass by. I couldn't understand the difference between the friends and enemies. Prabhupada said a friend of his had been shocked to hear that he was moving to the Bowery. Oh, Swamiji, his friend had said, you have gone to Bowery Street? It is a horrible place. I passed through many dangers, continued Prabhupada. Yet I couldn't understand that here is a danger. Everywhere I thought, this is my home. Srila Prabhupada recalled random details of his first preaching endeavors at 26 2nd Avenue. I was working very hard, he said, lecturing at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening, cooking and distributing prasadam to anyone who was coming. Do you remember Satsarup? He would bring some mango and other fruit. Daily you would come. Those days are past. Now I feel happiness remembering those days. Remember that boy, Shradisha. He would eat so many chapatis. He would never have enough. Every time he wanted more, I would give him 4 chapatis at a time. Kirtanananda, Achyutananda, 75 people would attend that Sunday feast. Prabhupada recalled the first San Francisco temple, the first Los Angeles temple, going to Seattle, pushing Gaurasundara to go to Hawaii, receiving a letter from Govinda Dasi in Hawaii who said that it was a mango season, except that when Prabhupada went there, it was a rat season, and all night the rats were running in the rafters. This is a new life, this Krishna consciousness, said Prabhupada. There is no doubt about it. His thoughts returned to his upcoming tour, and he said he could sleep in 3 seats across in the airline. But he cautioned the devotees to be careful that once he got to America, he not get kidnapped. Previously, he had considered that Krishna may have been detaining him from going to the West, so that he could not be disturbed by the demons. But now he would go in any case. Prabhupada was ready to leave, but the delays and anxieties persisted. Bhagavata returned from Calcutta, but Srila Prabhupada was not pleased to see him. Why, he demanded. Had he come back with Abhiram? Bhagavata said he had wanted to be with Srila Prabhupada, and he thought that Abhiram would handle the last steps of getting the green card. Prabhupada reprimanded Bhagavata, saying service to Guru was better than being with him. Then Tamala Krishna left for Delhi to arrange for tickets. So when 2 days later Srila Prabhupada learned that there might be a delay of several days before Tamala Krishna and other Americans in the party could leave India. He said he could leave immediately without them taking Sutakirti as his servant. Then Prabhupada heard of an airport strike in London, and the night before his scheduled departure, his health worsened. Many devotees urged him not to go, but amazingly the tickets and the passport arrived. And that midnight of August 28th, after the 6-month stay at Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada and his party left from the front gate of Krishna Balaram Mandir, headed for Delhi in the caravan of cars. Just Prabhupada was leaving. Bisan Chandra Sheth, a friend of Prabhupada's in Vrindavan, had come and protested, I will not be good if something happens and you leave your body outside of Vrindavan. Prabhupada told Mr. Sheth that because his disciples were so much in love with him, he could not easily refuse their request. If the trip became too difficult, he said, he would return immediately. He told Mr. Sheth that he was simply depending on Krishna. Prabhupada rode lying on a mattress in a back seat of car. And after 2 hours of driving over roads greatly damaged by flooding, then reached Delhi airport. Srila Prabhupada waited in the car. The early morning was warm and devotees opened the car doors. Bhavananda Goswami, who had just been released from jail in Bengal, had arrived in time to see Srila Prabhupada. Bhavananda approached the car and placed his head on the Prabhupada's feet. Prabhupada asked him, how are you? Bhavananda reported that everything was improving in Mayapur. All the local sadhus and citizens were now siding with ISKCON against the hoodlums who had attacked the temple. Srila Prabhupada was moved to an airport waiting room prior to going through the customs formalities. About 10 devotees were there to see him off as he left with his party for 4. Tamala Krishna, Upendra, Pradyumna and Pradyumna's wife, Arundhati. Srila Prabhupada sat upright on the airport couch, silently fingering the beads in his bead bag. His bare feet resting on his sandals were slightly swollen. as were his hands. He looked to see who was present and slightly nodded to each disciple in recognition. The devotees felt there was no need for Prabhupada to talk. Just being with him was wonderful and fully satisfying. He had already spoken to them fully and had given himself in his books in so many ways. So they chanted and looked lovingly at him. Up until the last moment when he went by a wheelchair onto the plane. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So thank you very much. I think this is the end of 52nd chapter. Wonderful pastimes. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you laugh. Many pastimes, many instructions of Prabhupada to each and every one of us. And really wonderful. I really fully enjoyed reading this particular chapter. And I thank you for the opportunity given. Wonderful, simply wonderful. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji, as you said, it's simply wonderful narration. Thank you for making us go through all of these emotions and all of these pastimes. And definitely, I think in the middle, when Prabhupada was recollecting or retrospecting on his times in New York and all those things, it was very wonderful and heartwarming as well. So devotees can unmute themselves to share any reflections, or if they have any questions, please ask.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, wonderful. Prabhu, I just wanted to ask you one question. Prabhupada said that he would sleep in 3 seats across the airplane, but he cautioned the devotees to be careful that once he got to America, he not get kidnapped.
You are jokingly saying to everybody, because he had gone before, and normally this because he was very sick, jokingly he said that it's nothing like that.
Okay.
Most tell this thing.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Anybody wants to actually comment or tell us their realization about this chapter? If anything, anybody wants to say anything. Wonderful realizations of this chapter,
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, thank you for the wonderful narration, Prabhuji. You brought out the the mood and the essence so nicely just by your wonderful reading. So I was just thinking that the kidnap thing, which Mataji was mentioning, once he goes there, I think many devotees in the US, many yatras, they would want Prabhupada for their to visit. So that's what Prabhupada was mentioning, I thought.
Yeah. Correct. Good, Mother. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Prabhuji. Talking about one learning, I think one thing that constantly was shining throughout this chapter was how Prabhupada depended on Krishna, and that's what he was trying to highlight by recollecting or remembering his past experiences. And also towards the end, he said it. I mean, that is a principle on which I'm living. Do everything to the best of your ability and depend on Krishna.
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. Thanks for the wonderful narration, Prabhu. It was very nice to hear from you. So, one thing, Prabhu, like when we look at disciples of Srila Prabhupada, so it immediately first thing that comes to mind is how they have dedicated their life for the Prabhupada's mission, whole and soul. So that is very prominent whenever we discuss about Prabhupada Lilamrta. So that is what I felt like to.
Yeah, each one of them are serving by turns. Many God brothers, many disciples came from various parts of the world, and they just want to serve Prabhupada. That's all. Very, 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 very nice chapter. Out of all, of course, all chapters are very nice, but this really has touched me. This chapter.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Anand Brahms. It was really wonderful. I mean, yeah, as I said, the ups and downs and swings were coming very much in this, and I really, it really showed also how Prabhupada, despite doing all these things, how he felt the gratitude for his disciples and linking everything to his spiritual master and Krishna making arrangement. The height of humility, that he shows it is like really amazing. And every time he used to leave it to Krishna and say, maybe I have a little more time, but his whole thought process is to complete the unaccomplished work, which he always felt. It was like more and more, and he was getting so enthusiastic at every stage. That is really, that is really something touches my heart. That's thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful message.
So if it is not, nobody there to comment or anything, I think we'll finish a little early this class.
No problem.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to read this particular chapter. So once again, we will get an opportunity, if possible, and we will close the class today, little early. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavabhyo. Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.